Good morning and welcome to our Veterans Day Assembly. You know, Valley Christian is known for many things and in many areas that we get to serve, but by far this is one of our most memorable times throughout the year because it is our honor and privilege to look around the room at the men and women who have served our country and give them honor today. And so we thank you and welcome you to our Veterans Day Assembly. I'd like to open us in a word of prayer. Please pray with me. Father, we thank you that through the many highs and lows that this country has experienced, you've put men and women in place to protect us, to defend us, to give us the freedoms that we often take for granted. God, may today be just a small reminder to them that we love them and honor them and so value their service to this country. God, we thank you that in many areas of the world, they can't have these services. They can't have these assemblies because they lack the freedom that they deserve. And so, Father, we give you today. We thank you for blessing our country. Even though at times it seems chaotic, we know you are in control. And so, God, may we worship you today by honoring these men and women. In your Son's name, amen. I'd like to welcome up Mr. Paul Shannon.
Thank you. At this time, I would like to ask that you please silence all cell phones for the remainder of the service. Thank you. Would you please stand with me, if you're able, for the presentation of the colors and remain standing for our national anthem and the Pledge of Allegiance.
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and
Please be seated.
Self-evident that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these rights are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and posterity do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America.
And 7 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this nation, on this continent, a new nation, conceived in liberty and the proposition that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
Of the fruits
Thank you, well done. I'd like to introduce Mayor Kevin Hartke to you, City of Chandler, and a fellow believer. He has a few words of welcome.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you, Valley Christian, for holding this event to honor our veterans, as well as really giving me the privilege of joining you for a bit here. I do want to introduce one of my partners for good, Councilmember Odie Harris, who is also with us. As the City of Chandler, we are grateful for our veterans and the work that they have done and continue to do. And because of that, Council and myself have started a Veterans Commission, one of our official city commissions, that will specifically attend to the cares and concerns as well as opportunities to celebrate with our veterans. So we will be appointing this team next month, and they will actually start working, and I mean working, for us starting in January. So if you are a veteran, we want to thank you for your service. If you have interest in learning more about this, jump on our chandleraz.gov page and just look for boards and commissions. We will be, again, taking applications for a few more weeks. And also, I would also like to invite each and every one of you to join us this afternoon at 5 o'clock. We will be dedicating our new Veterans Memorial Field, which is part of our Veterans Oasis Park. Who's counting how many times I've said the word veterans this day? Not enough, that's the word. But we will be dedicating this field this afternoon at 5 p.m. This will be a living, breathing memorial to our veterans and their service in our community. So once again, I want to thank you all for Valley Christian for holding this event and for the service of each and every one of our veterans. God bless you.
Thank you, Mayor Hartke. Great to have you here. Councilman Harris also, thank you. Well, what is it that we are commemorating with this assembly? November 11th. Well, just over 100 years ago, the largest war the world had ever experienced up to that point was coming to an end. At the time, this huge war was called the Great World War. It was on this very day in 1918, the 11th day of the 11th month, at 11 o'clock in the morning, the fighting of the Great World War ended with an armistice, a ceasefire. A year later, President Woodrow Wilson proclaimed November 11th as the first remembrance of what was called Armistice Day, to recognize all of those who died in that horrific worldwide conflict. That war would later, of course, be called World War I, when an even larger world war occurred, and that was World War II. After World War II and the Korean War, Congress expanded Armistice Day to include not just a day to honor the soldiers who died in World War I, but to honor all military veterans who served. And the name, of course, was changed from Armistice Day to Veterans Day, 1954. Through our observances, we honor and we try to thank more than 21 million Americans who have served to secure our country and preserve our precious freedoms. We are all aware, it's even been mentioned this morning already, that we have some difficulties, we have challenges in our country today. Violence, natural disasters, illnesses, some self-serving attitudes, division have hurt so many people. But remember that none of this escapes God's notice. Also remember that God can use each of us as His instruments to show His love and offer His grace to others. And we need that so badly. Please pray about how God might use you to serve others in His kingdom and to strengthen our nation as we honor those who have put their lives on the line for us. I've been given the sign-in sheets from our veterans today. I hope each of you veterans had a chance to put your name there. If we didn't get it, I apologize. But I'm going to go ahead and read through the roster of those who are with us. And if you can stand or wave a hand and remain standing if you're able to do that, then we'd like to hold our applause and thank you with our applause when everyone has been introduced. Nelson Nickel, U.S. Air Force. Clinton. We're glad you're here, Nelson, but we would like to hold our applause so we can get through the names a little more quickly. Thank you. Clinton Graham, U.S. Coast Guard. Judson, and I'm not seeing the last name, Fayed, maybe? U.S. Navy? Great. Angela Lovegren, U.S. Air Force. Jim Higginbotham, U.S. Navy. Dean Nittmeyer, U.S. Army. Councilman O.D. Harris, U.S. Army. Barney Barnum, U.S. Navy, my father-in-law. Ken Miller, U.S. Marine Corps. Matt Jarka, U.S. Air Force. Steve Hungerford, U.S. Army. Jeff Hankins, U.S. Navy. Gary Dodrell, U.S. Marine Corps. Sid Strand, U.S. Army. Bill Kubat, U.S. Navy. Gregor Carr, U.S. Navy. Donald Sharp, U.S. Army. Butch Douglas, U.S. Army. Charles Young, U.S. Air Force. Brian Stuber, U.S. Army. Bob Harrison being represented by Marshall in the U.S. Army. Daryl Van Kloppenberg, U.S. Air Force. Chris Hyde, U.S. Marine Corps. Norm Olkema, U.S. Army. Dan Roth, U.S. Army. Del Grun, U.S. Marines. Gene Hudson, U.S. Army. Paul Wegg, U.S. Army. And Danny Klaus, U.S. Coast Guard. Let's show them our thanks. You have a lot of fans in this room. Thank you. The choir is going to sing a song here in a moment. It's a tribute to the armed services, and we would like to have you, at the appropriate time, to please stand. You veterans, when you hear your song, if you just want to give a wave, you can also do that. Feel free to turn and face the students. They'd love to see your smiling face also. Please be seated and turn your attention to the screen. Thank you.
Raise your right hand and repeat after me. I say your name. Do solemnly swear. Support and defend. The Constitution of the United States. Against all enemies. Foreign and domestic. And to bear true faith. And allegiance to the same. That I will obey. The orders of. The President of the United States. And the orders of. Those officers appointed over me according to regulations and the Uniform Code of Military Justice. So help me God.
We celebrate Veterans Day on the anniversary of the armistice that ended World War I. The armistice that began on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. The timing of this holiday is quite deliberate in terms of historical fact. But somehow it always seems quite fitting to me that this day comes deep in autumn, when the colors are muted and the days seem to invite contemplation.
Someday, Liz, I'll go back.
Said Private First Class Peter Roberts Zanata of the 37th Engineered Combat Battalion and 1st Assault Wing to hit Omaha Beach.
I'll go back, and I'll see it all again. I'll see the beach, the barricades, and the graves.
Those words of Private Zanata comes to us from his daughter, Lisa Zanata Hen.
and a heart-rending story about the events her father spoke of so often. She tells some of his stories of World War II, but says of her father,
The story to end all stories was D-Day.
He made me feel the fear of being on that boat, waiting to land. I can smell the ocean and feel the seasickness. I can see the looks on his fellow soldiers' faces, the fear, the anguish, and the uncertainty of what lay ahead. And when they landed, I can feel the strength and courage of the men who took those first steps through the tide to what must have surely looked like instant death.
and like all the families of those who went to war, she described how she came to realize how her own father's survival was a miracle.
So many men died. I know that my father watched many of his friends be killed, and I know that he must have died inside a little each time.
Lisa began her story by quoting her father, who promised that he would return to Normandy. She ended with a promise to her father who died 8 years ago of cancer.
I'm going there, Dad, and I'll see the beaches and the barricades and the monuments. I'll see the graves, and I'll put flowers there, just like you wanted to do. I'll feel all the things that you made me feel, and I'll see everything you helped me see through your eyes. I'll never forget what you went through, Dad, and I won't let anyone else forget it either. Dad, I will always be proud.
Through the proud words of a loving daughter, a D-Day veteran has shown us the meaning of this day far better than any of us can.
It is enough for us to say about Private Donata and all the men and women of honor and courage. We will always remember.
We will remember that you heeded the call to stand behind your country,
To protect it for liberty and justice for all.
Today, right here at home, the fight continues as new enemies emerge and our freedoms are threatened.
We see your example then and follow it now.
because of your courage,
We can be brave in the unknown.
because of your selflessness,
We can serve others.
because you fought for our freedom,
We can worship freely and spread God's word.
because you protected our rights.
Now we defend them still.
We will always be proud.
We will always be prepared.
We will always be thankful for your service, both then and now.
Good morning, students, faculty, staff, and very, very special guests. My name is Joanna Banta, and I serve as the Choral Department Associate Conductor here at the high school campus of Valley Christian Schools. This is my sophomore daughter, Rebecca. Our guest speaker today is someone that I have known since I was 9 years old. He led me in a prayer as I professed my faith in Jesus. He baptized me, he married me, and he even welcomed me into his home when I said I do to his middle son.
I know our speaker as my papa. He read to me, he takes me on breakfast dates, and he always encourages me and cheers me on.
My father-in-law has been a pastor for over 50 years, and he served in the United States Army. During his time of service, he was awarded 3 medals: the Bronze Star for meritorious achievement and ground operations against hostile forces,
the Air Medal for meritorious achievement while participating in aerial flight,
and the Bronze Star Medal for heroism in ground combat. I know you will give your utmost respect and attention as we welcome up Pastor and Army Chaplain Byron Banta.
Well, good morning to you, and I want to thank Mr. Shannon for the invitation to be here to participate today. And he made it very clear to me that although I'm a pastor, sermons are not allowed today. My audience, and I'm just honored to be in the presence of fellow veterans, but my audience today are those of you in the bleachers, it's the students. My charge is threefold. The second thing I want to do is to fan the flames of patriotism in your hearts. For you students, when you leave here today, that you will love America more than you did when you came in. The third thing I want to do is to help you to appreciate veterans. And I really like what Valley Christian does, to have a service like this and just let a veteran get up and just tell his story and understand sort of what the veteran's life was like. But the first thing I want to do is to embarrass Mrs. Banta. And that's a large chore because she's a hard-hearted woman. It was a blessed day when Joanna came into our family. It will never be the same. Never. Don't leave that woman unattended in your kitchen for 10 minutes. Or she will rearrange the whole thing. But let me tell you a story that goes way back to when she was just a little girl. When I became the pastor of my church, Joanna would sing sometimes, 8, 9-year-old girl, her little dress, she'd get up singing. Well, there was a family in the church that had some boys, and one of them was a wayward little cuss. And he had graduated from high school and was just kind of a rebel. Well, his mom said, "Would you please come to church with me on Mother's Day?" Well, he did. Well, it happened on that Sunday that Joanna sang. And as the service is over, this guy came up to her, this young man, and said, "That was a beautiful song. And the next time you sing, I want to know because I'm going to come back and hear you sing." Well, there was a little connivance going on because Joanna's mom would told this rebel's mom, "Joanna's singing next Sunday," and she would go to her son and say, "Hey, Joanna's going to be singing, and you promised." And he started coming to church when she sang, and wouldn't you know, God got a hold of that man's life. He got married. He worked like a dog to help his wife finish college. She worked like a dog to help him finish college. And in the meantime, he had become a part-time youth pastor in our church. Well, when he graduated, he went to seminary and earned his master's degree. He got his doctorate. And today, he is the executive pastor of a huge church just south of Chicago. Isn't it amazing that God was using Joanna back then when she was just a little girl? And she continues to do it today. She does it here at Valley Christian. I will tell you, students, that she loves you. She talks about it all the time. And one of the big blessings for me is the friendship that she's developed with Mrs. Hine. Those are two incredible women. So I want to ask Mrs. Hine if she would please. There you are. Don't sneak up on me like that. Would you present that with Joanna and Mrs. Oh, great, she's crying. Yeah. I made her cry. Now let your servant depart in peace. Okay, let's get down to business here, kids. The year is 1968. You're in a helicopter flying above the jungles of South Vietnam. Your destination is the Ashaw Valley and the forward operating base of the 1st Battalion, 7th Cavalry Regiment, the 1st Cavalry Division of the United States Army. Your unit's mission is to disrupt the supply line known as the Ho Chi Minh Trail and to drive the enemy deep into the jungle. The Ho Chi Minh Trail was a supply line that they used to bring men and material from the north to attack South Vietnam. Your battalion deployed 100 men to the valley floor, and their job was to block all movement of enemy troops and supplies. Their mission also was to pursue the enemy into the hills toward the west. 200 more troops protected the forward operating base and pursued the enemy into the jungles to the east. Another 100 troops were deployed on the hill about 125 yards down a narrow but well-worn jungle trail to the east, and their job was to block any enemy troops coming to attack the forward base. Your job was to be the pastor to these 400 troops. And you ask yourself, how in the world did I wind up here? Actually, I was in the Army twice. I interrupted my college career and joined the Army and was in the field artillery. If you like to pull a lanyard and make a cannon go boom, and hear something 5 miles away go kaboom, artillery's for you. I learned a lot in the 3 years I spent as enlisted man in the Army. It taught me some important life lessons that I use even today. It taught me the importance of order and cleanliness and neatness and discipline and teamwork and respect for rank and authority. It taught me about patriotism, and it taught me to respect our flag. And in addition to living life in the Army for those 3 years, it helped me shore up my moral and ethical values that I learned in my family and in my church growing up. And in that 3 years, something really critical happened. A transition was made where the faith of my family became mine. And I really owned it. The chaplaincy part came years later. I had completed college, finished my seminary training, had become a pastor of a church in Montana, had gotten married. When the missionary sending agency of my denomination made me aware of the critical need for chaplains, Shirley and I prayed about it and felt God's leadership to go back into the Army. With God's blessing, I re-enlisted. This time as a chaplain. I became a soldier again. But this time, I was a pastor to soldiers and their families. Well, really, what do chaplains do? On the Army side, we serve on the staff of our commanding officer. We're on his special staff. And our role is to advise him on matters of religion and morals and morality. But on the Godward side, it's different. We see our job as bringing God to soldiers and bringing soldiers to God. Chaplains are pastors and evangelists who wear the uniforms of their country. Now, this chaplain's thing broke into 3 segments. After going to the orientation course at Fort Hampton, New York, I was assigned to Fort Lewis, Washington. And there I was primarily a counselor. A counselor just like your pastor does. People with various problems, with marriage problems, with work-related issues, all the things that come to play in a person's spiritual life with being a pastor, a soldier. I was also the chaplain for the stockade. What's a stockade? Well, you don't want to know. A stockade is a jail. The military services have something called the Uniform Code of Military Justice. It applies to all the branches of service. And soldiers who run afoul of that sometimes are busted down to a private E1 again, and they spend some time in the stockade. And it was my job to counsel them and to minister to them. And a third part of it was preaching at a chaplain. It was just like any church. You know, you go in and if you go in as a Presbyterian chaplain, you preach like a Presbyterian. If you're Assembly of God chaplain, you preach like Assembly of God. If you're a Baptist chaplain, you preach like a Baptist. That's what he wants you to do. And so, a whole worship service is there. Now, the second segment of it was in Vietnam. Vietnam was an interesting proposition, as you might well imagine. I served for 9 months with a rifle battalion, with infantry guys. In the last 3 months, I served at a place called UNK, which is a personnel battalion, and we ministered guys coming into the country to serve, and those who had served their tours of duty and were going back home again. The third year, I was assigned to the hospital chaplain at Fort Polk, Louisiana. And God used all 3 of these segments to confirm my calling, to prepare me for the next phase of my ministry, which was to be a church planter and a pastor in civilian life. And I promised Mr. Shannon that I would not preach. And this is not a sermon. But I want to tell you, kids, that every phase of your life, everything you go through, God is shaping you for the next thing. He's doing that now. And one of the ways he shapes you is by giving you the mom and dad that you have. Now, what I want you to do is obey them and honor them just like God said do. Okay, Mr. Senator, I'm so sorry. I could not help myself. The most impactful of 3 segments was, as you might imagine, the Vietnam experience. And I want to mention quickly just 4 lessons from Vietnam that have been transferable to my civilian ministry and has helped me as a man. They can be useful to you right now as you feel your way toward the ministry God is preparing you for. Lesson number 1. The soldiers cannot come to you. You must go to them. You cannot sit in your office and shepherd your flock. You get out of your office, you get on one of these, and you go do this. You go to where the troops are, and you minister to them. This obviously is applicable to civilian ministry. If people cannot or will not come to you, then you, in obedience to God, go to them. I learned, secondly, that sanctified loafing is a real good ministry. You can't sit in your office and shepherd your flock. You just go spend time with your people. Spiritual topics will arise. And the way it worked in the Vietnam era, that you would go to your troops, you go to the radio, and they would, can you receive, well, my call sign was Red Baron 19. They'd call the company, can you receive Red Baron 19 at your location? If they said yes, then you got on a chopper, you went out, and you preached, you ministered to the guy. But the most beneficial part was just hanging out with them, just being them. You eat with them, the most delightful food. You sleep beside them. You experience their lives. You talk with them. And as you talk with them, spiritual topics come up. And your ministry really begins when you do that, real ministry. But now, as an aside, how many of you guys are 11 Bravo? Any infantry guys here? The infantry, you're going to have to do what amateur guys do. Now, chaplains are non-combatants. We do not carry arms unless ordered to by our commanding officer. But you go out in the field with these guys, and sometimes they get a mission. One time, I was out with this company, and we're working in an area where there was this meandering river, and the unit that there were 4 platoons at a rifle company, and the platoon I was with was going in to sort of clear this area, and the point man saw an enemy soldier way up ahead. And it's just a fleeting thing, he was too far away to take a shot. So we knew that there were enemy in the area, and I mean, walking along, and everybody was walking as silent they could. The infantry guys, had their M16s up, ready, watching where they stepped, and it was very still, very quiet, and hot. And people were using hand signals to communicate, to be quiet. And all of a sudden, there was the mighty roar, and an F-14 Phantom dropped upon them. Boom! Closer than we had hoped. And the soldier in front of me let out a string of expletives you could not imagine, and finished with, "Oh, son of a..." Bet you thought I was going to say something different than that, didn't you? And he saw me standing there, the chaplain, and he was profusely apologizing. And I was thinking, "Son, you read my mind." And I said to him, "Just call them like you see them, buddy." Another time, I was out with this is the time that of all the time in Vietnam, I was utterly terrified, utterly scared out of my mind, and it lasted for 5 full seconds. I was out with a company, and I had the worship service and hanging out with the guys, and they got a mission. Because the intelligence said that there were small groups of Vietnamese soldiers coming down, and they wanted our company to go interdict them, to stand in the way and, rain on their parade. And the company commander took 5 or 6 really good soldiers and sergeants and said, "You go ahead, here's the map, here's where we're going, you go ahead and find the position and we'll come to you." Well, it got darker than 100 midnights in a cypress swamp. You could not see your hand in front of your face. And we were going through this place, big old bush tree things about 10 feet high. And all of you were spaced out about 5 yards apart. And the company commander would sometimes, to try to locate where it was, would get under his poncho with his map with a flashlight with a red filter on it. And the red filter kept you from ruining your night vision, and he did that several times. But one time when he stopped, I turned around to talk to the kid behind me. And when I turned around, the man in front of me was gone. And there I was, leading 30 guys behind me, lost as a goose, and terror swelled up in my heart. And I meant to whisper, but I said, "Hey!" And the guy behind me said, "Shut up, you're going to get us killed." But I managed to catch up with those guys. But for 5 seconds, I was in total terror. And just for the record, we did get to the right place. And there briefly, I would say all hell broke loose. But the enemy did not want to engage, so all's well that ended well. Sometimes stuff just happens like that. You hang out with them after you go in. I mentioned the third thing that I learned, which you have to understand what a soldier's life is like. The young men and women who did the reading toward the end captured a lot of that. You see the soldier in the picture, the one with the radio on his back. You know what he's thinking? He's thinking, I might die today. Now, he's not forming that sentence in his mind. That sentence is playing just below the surface, sort of just below the level of consciousness, and you call that stress. And you know why he's thinking that? Because as a radio operator, when they go on that patrol, when they go into the hills, the platoon leader is going to be right up front, and if they get ambushed, the strategy is to take out the platoon leader. You've taken out the leader, you take out the radio man, you've taken out the communication, and you've crippled that unit. So he knows he's the target. How do you pastor him? What do you do? You do it by being approachable and being sober-minded. This is no time to try to be a clown. You're dealing with men who may not make it through the day. Now, I don't want you to think that chaplains go through these combat scenarios every day. We didn't. But did often enough to be troubling. But when you're dealing with people in life situations that are stressful, you have to be approachable, and you have to be honest. A thing I learned also is that people need and want to hear the truth. See, those soldiers didn't need to hear Jesus makes the flowers grow. They needed to hear that there's a way to eternal life through God's Son, Jesus. And when you're preaching in those situations, you never know when that's going to be the last sermon they ever heard, or the last sermon you will ever preach. That is true in civilian life, because as we all know, life is a very tenuous thing. I have a hat that I wear 2 times a year. I wear this hat on Memorial Day, and I wear it on Veterans Day. See, not every story that veterans tell are funny. Some are really sad. They were sad then, and they're sad now. I wear this hat in honor of people I know whose names are on the Vietnam War. I know you're not supposed to wear a hat indoors, but I hope you will indulge me just this time and let me wear my hat indoors. Every veteran that you know has stories that are haunting. But if you ask them if they would do it again, they would say yes in a heartbeat. God bless you, and may God bless the United States of America.
Oh, that's great. Thank you so much for being with us, and may you feel God's presence in your life as you go. Veterans, families, students with grandparents, if you'd like to, we're going to have some pictures you can be taken down here if you want to do that as you leave. Thank you so much. God bless you.